Listen, my life was messed up too. And I suppose in one way or the other, I have broken all God's commandments in some way.
There's a question that people have never dared to ask directly about Dale Evans, the woman whom all of America called the Queen of the West, the one who stood by Roy Rogers for more than 50 years, the one who smiled on the screen, sang songs about love and faith, the one whom millions of American families saw as the model of perfection. That question is whether she was truly happy. And the answer, when it was finally revealed, shocked everyone who had ever believed in that fairy tale. Because hidden behind the radiant smile, behind the glittering cowboy outfits, behind the sweet songs echoing through American TV screens every week, was a woman carrying secrets that she couldn't speak of for many decades. Today, we will tell that true story. Not the Hollywood story, not the story that the studios staged, but the story of an ordinary woman who lived an extraordinary life, full of sorrow, love, loss, and finally, the truth set free. Few people know that Dale Evans was not her real name. On the 31st of October 1912, in Uvalde, Texas, a baby girl was born with the name Francis Octavia Smith. No stage lights, no cameras, no audience. Just an ordinary child, born into an ordinary family, in a dry and windy land. But Francis's life was never truly ordinary. Her childhood passed in the home of her uncle, Dr. Elad Massey, in Osceola, Arkansas. It sounded stable, but that stability was only on the surface. Inside, Francis carried a deep loneliness of a child lacking the true warmth of family. And when people are lonely long enough, they will do reckless things to escape. At age 14, Francis ran away with a man named Thomas F. Fox. They married in secret. A year later, at age 15, she was already the mother of a boy named Thomas F. Fox, Jr. And just one more year, at age 16, she became a single mother. The young husband left, without an explanation, without a goodbye. Just the sudden, cold, and cruel absence of a man not mature enough to bear the responsibility he himself had created. 16 years old, alone, a child in her arms, in Memphis, Tennessee, no money, no degree, no one to rely on. An ordinary person might have collapsed. An ordinary person might have given up. But Francis Octavia Smith was not ordinary. She turned to music, not because she thought she would become famous, but because music was the only thing she had. She began singing and playing piano at local radio stations WMC and WREC in Memphis, earning every small penny to raise her child. It wasn't a career. It was survival, but it was also the beginning of a legend that no one, not even Francis herself, could have imagined. In 1929, while working at radio station WHAS in Louisville, Kentucky, a station manager looked at the paper with the name Francis Octavia Smith and shook his head. Too long, too difficult, not suitable for radio waves. He suggested a new name, Dale Evans. Short, bright, sounding like sunshine on the western prairie. And strangely, when Francis changed her name to Dale Evans, it felt like a new version of herself was awakening. Under that new name, her career began to soar. Her captivating jazz and swing voice quickly attracted listeners everywhere. Dale Evans became a beloved radio name. And then, something she had never dared to dream of happened. The 20th Century Fox studio signed a contract with Dale Evans. She entered the world of film with all the excitement and hope of someone seeing their dream come true for the first time. The executives looked at Dale Evans and saw a serious problem. She was a single mother. In the 1930s and 1940s, that was considered an unacceptable stain on the image of a movie star. Audiences back then wanted their idols to be perfect and pure. The studio's solution was a carefully staged lie. Tommy, Dale's biological son, would be introduced to the world as her brother. Not her son, but her brother. Dale knew that if she refused, her career would end before it began. She accepted. And from then on, every public appearance, every interview, every time someone asked about the teenager named Tommy, Dale Evans had to pretend he was her brother. The mother who had raised her child alone since age 16, who had fought with all her heart to give him a better life, was not allowed to call him her son in front of the world. It wasn't just a harmless lie to protect her image. It was a denial of the most important part of who she was, and that wound would follow Dale Evans to the end of her life. In 1944, Dale Evans got a role in the film The Cowboy and the Senorita. Her co-star was Roy Rogers, the handsomest cowboy in Hollywood, known as the King of the Cowboys in America. The first time they stood together on set, no one thought it would be the start of one of the most famous romances in American film history. They were just two actors doing their job. But life has arrangements that people can't foresee. In 1946, Roy's second wife, Arlene, died suddenly after giving birth to their son Roy Jr. Arlene's departure not only left Roy Rogers in unimaginable grief, it also left him with 3 young children and a home that suddenly became terrifyingly empty. Roy Rogers, the man who had once shone brilliantly on the silver screen, suddenly became a widowed father drowning in sorrow. Dale understood that feeling more than anyone. She had been alone. She had not known what tomorrow would bring. She had been the only one standing between her small child and an indifferent, cold world. And she came to Roy's side, not as someone calculating, not as an actress building an image, but as someone in the same situation who understood that sometimes the only thing a person needs is to know they are not alone. At the end of 1947, Roy Rogers proposed to Dale Evans in the most romantic way possible. Sitting on the back of his legendary horse Trigger, right before entering the rodeo arena in Chicago, in front of thousands of spectators, he turned to Dale and asked if she wanted to become his wife. On the 31st of December 1947, Dale Evans married for the 4th time in her life. But this was the first time the marriage didn't fall apart. After the wedding, Dale Evans became the mother to Roy's 3 children, Cheryl, Linda Lou, and the boy Roy Jr., whom everyone affectionately called Dusty. Roy accepted Tommy, Dale's son, as his own. And for the first time in many long years, Dale Evans was allowed to tell the world truthfully that Tommy was her son. Just that small act, being able to tell the truth after years of lying. But for Dale, it meant more than any film award she had ever received. They went on to adopt 4 more children. Mimi from Scotland, Dodie, a Native American girl, Sandy, and Debbie. Roy and Dale's home became a miniature world full of laughter, full of loving chaos, full of the diversity of fates connected by love rather than blood. And then in 1950, what both had hoped for happened. Dale became pregnant with their only biological child. Robin Elizabeth was born. But along with that joy came news no parent wants to hear. Robin was born with Down syndrome and many serious health problems. In the 1950s, Down syndrome was something people didn't dare mention in public. Society looked at children like Robin with pity mixed with discrimination. Hollywood completely avoided it. Pressure from all sides fell on Roy and Dale. Keep that child at home. Don't let the public see. Your image will be affected. Roy and Dale refused. They brought Robin into the light. They loved her without distinction, without hiding, without shame. They didn't let Hollywood decide their family story again. That was the moment Dale Evans was no longer just a movie star. She became a mother, courageously loving her child fully when the whole world told her not to. But that happiness was heartbreakingly short. In 1952, Robin died before turning 2. The child's room became silent, and that silence, as Dale later said, was heavier than anything she had ever carried in her life. After losing Robin, many thought Dale Evans would collapse completely. She didn't collapse. Instead, she did what very few people could do. She sat down and wrote. In 1953, the book Angel Unaware was published, told through the imagined voice of Robin herself, as if the child was looking down from heaven and recounting her short but meaningful journey on Earth. Hollywood was shocked. No one expected a movie star to write so publicly and honestly about the most painful thing in her life. Thousands of letters poured in from parents who had lived in the shadows, raising disabled children in silence and guilt. Men and women who had never dared tell anyone about their pain. Families who had thought they were alone in that journey. For the first time, They saw they were not alone. For the first time, someone spoke what they couldn't. In Oklahoma, the County Council on Intellectual Disabilities named their center after Dale Evans. A center bearing her name, built to care for children like Robin, is the most living legacy she left for the world. Dale later said that book was both a confession and a liberation, a way to honor Robin's short life and to bring light to those living in darkness. She did what the entire medical and social system of the time couldn't. She made people look at children seen as imperfect and see beauty in them, see meaning in them, see humanity in them. While Dale's inner world was going through such profound upheavals, on the outside, her and Roy Rogers' career was at an unprecedented peak. From 1951 to 1957, the Roy Rogers Show dominated American television screens. Every week, millions of families across the country gathered in front of the TV to watch Roy on his horse, Trigger and Dale on her horse, Buttermilk galloping across vast prairies. The song Happy Trails became the ending tune for each episode, resounding like a promise of a beautiful, pure, and hopeful life. America loved them. America believed in them. But behind the screen, the story was much more complex than what people saw. Dale later admitted that married life with Roy wasn't always as smooth as the image they projected on screen. Roy Rogers on screen was a gentle, kind man, always on the side of justice. But Roy Rogers at home was a strict father to the point of harshness. The standards he set for the children, the way he controlled the family, the rigid rules he imposed on every member of the household, all were far from the image of the kind cowboy the public adored. And there was something else Dale never said publicly while Roy was alive: the loneliness. The tours lasting weeks, months, left Dale often at home alone with the large brood of children, no spouse by her side, no one to share the burden, just her and the children, in a home where Roy's absence sometimes felt heavier than his presence. Dale later confessed that no stage lights, no fan base, no awards or fame could fill the void that loneliness in marriage left. And deeper than all that, the old wound was still there. Even though she was allowed to tell the truth about Tommy after marrying Roy, Dale couldn't erase the memory of the years pretending her son was her brother. That feeling of betraying herself, as Dale said, quietly gnawed at her every day, even when everything on the outside looked perfect. That's the truth no one wants to hear about a legend. In 1964, tragedy struck the Roy and Dale family once more. Debbie, their 12-year-old adopted daughter, was killed in a church bus accident. A child at the most beautiful age of life, suddenly gone. Losing Debbie, both Roy and Dale felt torn apart a second time. The old wound from Robin hadn't healed, and the new one piled on, deeper, more painful, and this time accompanied by the haunting of unanswerable questions. What if Debbie hadn't gotten on that bus that day? What if they had driven her to church in their own car? What if they had done something different? Dale later called this one of the darkest periods of her life. Not because the grief was less, but because this time, the grief came in a form she didn't know how to cope with. Not illness, not age, but accident. Random, no reason, no warning. In an effort to escape the shadow of painful memories, Roy and Dale decided to leave Chatsworth Ranch, where, as Dale said, the memories of loss seeped into every wall. They moved to Double R Bar Ranch in Apple Valley, California, seeking a new beginning. But there are pains that no place can heal. From then on, Dale Evans's public voice changed noticeably. In her speeches, interviews, the books she wrote further, there were no longer just cheerful messages about faith and hope. Instead, there was honesty about sorrow, about doubt, about the long nights when even faith wasn't enough to keep her standing. The image of the cheerful cowgirl that Hollywood had painstakingly built gradually gave way to a real woman, with real wounds, courageously facing a real world. Now we need to talk about what this video's title suggested. Dale Evans truly hated Roy Rogers more than anyone, but understand that in its true sense, not hate in the usual meaning, not resentment, not that she wanted him out of her life, but a much more complex emotion that only those who have loved deeply can understand. She hated his absence in the most important years. She hated the strictness he imposed on children who had already endured too much loss. She hated the times he was away, and she had to bear it all alone, from the pain of losing children to the responsibility of raising a large, unconventional family. She hated because she loved too much without being able to say it all. In American culture of the 1950s and 1960s, a wife didn't complain about her husband, especially when that husband was Roy Rogers, the star loved by all of America. Who would dare criticize the king of the cowboys of America? Dale stayed silent. For many decades, she smiled in front of the camera. She sang songs about love and happiness. She stood by Roy at every public event, always the perfect image of the wife, the mother, the ideal companion. But inside, she bore it alone. And that, in my opinion, is the quietest tragedy in Dale Evans's life. Not losing Robin, not losing Debbie, not the failed marriages before, but having to love a man without being able to tell him the full truth, in a marriage where she couldn't fully be herself. On the 6th of July, 1998, Roy Rogers died at age 86. Dale lost her partner of more than 50 years, the man she had loved, been angry with, forgiven, and been bound to in a journey longer than any cowboy film they had ever starred in together. When Roy died, Dale Evans had no image left to protect, no studio to please, no one to avoid offending, and she began to tell the truth. She spoke about the loneliness in the years he was away. She spoke about how he treated the children harshly. She spoke about the lingering pain over decades, from the years of pretending Tommy was her brother. That feeling of betraying herself never fully disappeared, even though the world had known the truth for a long time. Many fans were shocked. Some felt disillusioned. They wanted to believe that Roy and Dale were the perfect fairy tale, that their love was as beautiful as the songs they sang. But Dale Evans didn't want to be a fairy tale. She wanted to be the truth. Her daughter Dodie later recalled her mother's words, "A full life includes both joy and pain, and sharing both is the act of true courage." On the 7th of February 2001, Dale Evans passed away at age 88. According to her children's accounts, her final days were very peaceful, as if after all she had gone through, after all the secrets had been spoken, after all the wounds had been acknowledged, she could finally rest. She was ready to meet Robin again, meet Debbie again, and perhaps meet Roy again, the man she had loved. In the most complex way a woman can love a man, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers will forever be remembered as the queen and king of the cowboys of America. But Dale Evans's true legacy doesn't lie in the glittering cowboy outfits, not in the weekly broadcast episodes, not in the songs sung over generations. Her legacy lies in courage. Courage to love a child stigmatized by society. Courage to write about the pain of losing a child when the wound was still fresh. Courage to tell the truth about an imperfect marriage with an imperfect man, even if it might shatter the illusions of millions. She lived a life no one could call simple. She loved in ways no one could call easy, and she hurt in ways no one could measure. But she didn't let sorrow define her. Instead, she turned sorrow into purpose, turned loss into legacy, turned silence into voice. And that, perhaps, is the greatest thing a person can do in their life. Dale Evans, the little girl Francis Octavia Smith, from Uvalde, Texas, the 16-year-old single mother in Memphis, the woman who had to pretend her son was her brother, the wife who bore loneliness in the shadow of fame, the mother who mourned 2 children gone too soon. She was all of those things, and she was a legend, not because she was perfect, but because she never pretended to be perfect to the very end. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If Dale Evans's story makes you think about something in your own life, please leave a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you think stars like Dale Evans should share the truth earlier, or if you believe that sometimes certain truths can only be spoken when people have lived long enough to understand their meaning, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next stories about the real lives hidden behind the legends we think we know.